Welcome to this podcast, Holistic Creators, where we share our unique and universal stories about shaping the future for the 4 Ps: people, planet, purpose, and profit. My name is Swanette. I'm a mental coach and your host of this show. My intention for this show is to inspire you on your path to a holistic future. So welcome. Hello and welcome to my podcast, Holistic Creators. My name is Swanette and I'm your host. Today my guest is Lizzie Wagner. She is the CEO of the Lizzie Wagner Group, a coach, trainer, keynote speaker, stylist to the stars. So welcome to my show, Lizzie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share with you.
Yeah, and I know that my audience is already curious to see and hear you because you're looking so amazing. And thank you so much for being my guest today. Yeah, it's an honor for me to speak with you.
And it's equally an honor for me. Thank you. And I also love the fact we're fellow Germans.
Yeah, but we will have this interview in English so that everybody can listen because the audience is international. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I would like to get a little bit of an understanding about your background, where you come from. And you said, no, we have the same background. We are both from Germany originally. So
yes,
especially you in your childhood. So I would like to share a little bit about you and therefore open a presentation if this is okay for you.
Yes, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. So I guess where I'd like to start is that many people know that for many years I was working in the modelling industry. And I think it's really important for the viewers to know that that was purely by accident. And as we go through the presentation, I'll explain how that all came to play. So while we're looking at that is a really interesting little story in itself. That beautiful logo was actually created by some wonderful Indigenous young men that I had met in this incredible 20 years of working in outback regional Australia. So yes, I just wanted to make mention to them because I'm very proud of them for what they created there. It's actually the W from my name, but it looks like a shoe, which is putting your best foot forward, as they said. So it's great. So what I wanted to talk about today is actually overcoming fear and how we power through situations. A lot of people are very anxious when they become fearful about public speaking, or they become fearful about, the new job position that they want to take on. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And if we start with the next slide, this is a really good opportunity of explaining a little bit about fear. So I'd like you to imagine that this is a very, very busy train station. There are people everywhere. It's just after the war. And as you can see, people are madly trying to go to and from. And there was a beautiful young lady standing on the platform, and she had a tiny little bag, and she was sitting on the bag, and someone asked her the time. And she stood up and said, "There's the town clock." And with that, they stole her bag. So this had her only papers, her only pass, and whatever little things she had, possibly pictures of her family, because she was trying to go back behind the Iron Curtain to find her family. So as the train pulled in, there was a cattle cart, and there was a tiny little crack in the doorway, and there were some Navy personnel in that cattle cart. And one of them saw this young lady and her distress, and he said, "Quick, quick, jump on the train." Well, it was one of those sliding door moments because she was actually standing at the station, no papers. She didn't know what she was going to do. So very quickly and very suddenly, in a split second, she jumped on the train with these strange men going who knows where. They travelled through various checkpoints, and he hid her under the hay. He had a very big navy coat in which he hid her. And they travelled through many, many checkpoints, but unfortunately, they were going nowhere near where either of them were meant to go. Now, he was on prison camp leave from Norway, where they were cleaning up the minefields, and he had some rations. He had some cigarettes and a salami. So he was able to barter some cigarettes and the salami to get a barn in which they slept that night. And of course, the following morning he said, look, I've got to go back. I'm going to come back for you. And she said, oh, yeah, sure, you know, after the wartime, during the wartime, as if that would ever happen. But he did go back. And that big navy coat was made into her wedding dress. And he'd left her a big jumper and some boots. The boots were way too big, but she could put her own shoes inside the boot. And the jumper was unravelled and knitted into my brother and sister's christening outfit. So this is an extraordinary union of two people. I have to say, their love for one another must have been at first sight, because right till the very end of both of their lives, they were just in amour and in awe of one another. So it's about taking risks. And what would have happened if she didn't jump on the train? What would have happened if she stayed on the platform? So life, I learnt, is a series of chances. So if I can go back to the age of 9, I was standing on the Grenze, which is the border of the now official Iron Curtain, and my mother was crying and desperate because she wanted to see her family again. And of course, all my father's and mother's family were behind the Iron Curtain. So at 9, I made the decision that I was going to start modelling, because that would give me the international passport and the opportunity to travel to Europe, because by this stage we were living in Australia, and I would be able to find my family. So after some time in Europe, of course, both of their homelands were no longer, there was an opportunity for my father to travel to Australia to be part of the Australian National University and to set up the physics department. And they needed a fine German mechanical toolmaker engineer to actually help set up the physics department. But it was months on a ship, and then it was months in a Bonegilla, which was a migrant camp. Well, actually, it was a year. And then they had to go to the steelworks in Wollongong to pay off their passage. So Professor Mark Oliphant, the famous scientist, did wait for my father, and they eventually then got a position in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. So what you're seeing there with the barbed wire is exactly what I was looking at. I was absolutely terrified, but I also was very driven and had a passion to actually be able to find my family. The other huge advantage I had was that I had an Australian passport and my siblings didn't. So that meant that it was going to be just that little bit easier for me to get behind the Iron Curtain. So I guess now I'd like to ask you, what is it that drove you to start your career, Swanette? What was the passion? What was it that made you take this big leap forward?
Yeah, I would say that it was really a soul calling from the beginning on. So I had a near-death experience when I was 8 years old. And from this moment on, I was connected to, I would say, the higher consciousness. And for me, it was all about life, understanding what is life about, what are humans, what are animals, what are plants. And I was curious about history, about the old ages. And so for me, I started in medicine. I'm an engineer in chemical environmental technology. I'm a certified coach. And so I brought together different aspects of life to understand life. And so for me, it was really this, what is happening right now on this planet in this very massive evolutionary process we are in. And this is something that is driving me to understand that and to serve people, to liberate humanity from what perhaps we could call, like limited amount of freedom that we have at the moment, but different from what we could have. It is like we are living behind this iron curtain at the moment. And if we see what comes from the infinite intelligence, there's so much more possible if we step into our gift, if we really bring out our essence. And this is all about.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I'm so delighted to be able to actually share this story, because I haven't. And I think the time is probably right for people to know what this journey was. So I was very lucky that I was able to start in the modelling industry. My brother was a performer, a great singer and a guitarist, and my sister was a ballerina. The other sister was the business of the family. And so because by 9, I was already 36, 24, 36 and 5'9", Mum felt it was probably really appropriate because I didn't really fit in with other people anyway. And it's true, I did feel a little bit more like a sense of belonging. So that's the other thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. We all crave that sense of belonging. And unfortunately, now we achieve what we think is a sense of belonging through Facebook or Instagram or the amount of followers we have. But we all know that that's really relatively empty. There are obviously some genuine friends there, but we can't use that as creating a sense of belonging. Because we were from behind the Iron Curtain, my mum came from an area called Silesia and my father came from Mahula. Even Mum's homeland had actually become Poland. So, yes, it was really quite challenging. Early on, I was always very creative and did a lot of creative writing and poetry. And I was always told I was too sensitive and too emotional. But when I did actually achieve getting back behind the Iron Curtain, I found my cousins were the same. They all played instruments. They loved Goethe. They loved Bach, because in the village where my father comes from is the area where Bach was born. So it really was great for me to get that sense of belonging. I also had the sense of belonging within the modelling circle, if that could be even possible, with other females or young ladies like myself. Let's just look at what is it that blocks people from achieving their goal. Is it fear? You know, because I work as a coach also, there are a lot of people that fear public speaking, or there are a lot of people that fear dressing to attract the light, that people might, you know, think they stand out too much. I wanted to talk about that too, because if you imagine you are this magnificent, bright, brilliant light, of course, that light is going to attract a lot of moths. And a lot of moths will get attracted and they will get burnt and fall off. And this is like people. People get really attracted to your light, but then they feel they get burnt, or they want to be, you know, as bright as you, but maybe it's not possible. So it's about the light you project out there and owning it and being brave, you know, looking your best, feeling your best, presenting your best, and not worrying that you have to dumb yourself down to not offend other people. You see, the trick with moths is they eat your clothes, they eat holes in your name and your reputation. So you need to be able to be strong enough to have some sort of barrier or boundary that accepts the kind of energies that you take in. That can be really difficult when you're a presenter or a model or an actor or in your job, Swanette, because we're with people all the time, but the mission is to actually help them to come to your level of light, or to make them shine brighter than you. You know, the old adage of don't give someone, show them your crown, show them how to wear their own. So from every negative past experience, you know, we become more honest and open and vulnerable. I have to tell you, it was terrifying going behind the Iron Curtain. And the first time I went via the train, and the things that I saw, and I was late, and then I got thrown out for spreading Western propaganda, and I tried several times. In the end, I discovered it was much easier to fly than catch the train. But yeah, there was so much fear around that. And I didn't tell my family because they would have been terrified. I did have some family in the West by that stage that helped me. But I was terrified if I ever spoke out about what was happening, that something would happen to one of my family members behind the Iron Curtain. So everything was fear-based. And then you're in the modelling industry where, you know, people think that it's going to elate your self-esteem and confidence. But in fact, it does the absolute opposite, because you're told you're too big, or, you know, you should be blonde and you're a brunette, or you should have blue eyes instead of brown, or, you know, you're too big or you're too small, or whatever the case may be. So I found that a lot of people that entered the acting and modelling industry were going in for elation, but coming out even more broken. But then sometimes broken's good, and I'll explain that in a minute. So I guess as far as fear is concerned, if you're focusing on the present moment and not what might happen or what's happened in the past, like the living in the moment saying is actually correct, and to imagine now all of the things that you've done that were terrifying, and all the mistakes you've made, and how that's made you such a great person today. So, Swanette, can you think of anything that was devastating at the time, that crushed you, that actually made you better at what you are and what you're doing?
Absolutely, yes. So I have had several setbacks and a lot of learnings. And just sharing, when I was about 18 years old, but just for a hobby, I worked as a model as well. So being, yeah, yeah. And for me, it was like, okay, how can I stand all the people looking at me and, yeah, scanning me if everything was perfect. And as you said, for me, it was kind of different. I felt really, okay, I'm strong enough to stand this, and I don't have fear anymore if people are looking at me. And this helped me also to go on stage or to have like my own podcast, because this was part of my growing process. But there has been a moment when I really had a massive setback, and this was just before I left Germany, because I was in a burnout. And I really had the fear that I was not able to continue working, that I was so low in my energy that I couldn't continue with my job and holding my business. So this also brought me to the point to think about what is it that I really want to create in the future. And with that, I closed my business. I sold my house, my horses, my car, everything, and just came with 3 cats, a laptop, and a suitcase to Madeira Island, where I'm now living. And it's a process now of recreating myself and really figuring out how can I serve humanity for the best. So this was coming out of this fear into my own empowerment and my own authenticity right now.
Excellent. Well, to add to that, after working around Australia and having an opportunity to work as a model in Europe, as I said, it did create a good sense of belonging. And, you know, we talk about Me Too today, but I was 9 and I had the most inappropriate things happen or tried to happen right through my modelling career. But it was just like, well, you know, I don't talk about the Iron Curtain. I don't talk about what happens behind there. I don't talk about what happens at work. We just don't say anything. We fit in. And that was a big thing with my family. Like, you're in Australia now, you know, don't speak the language, just fit in, don't make a fuss. So, you know, standing out as a model was a little bit like extraordinary. But then again, my brother stood out as a performer. So it was all a little bit contradictory. After being in Europe for some time, I came back to Australia and I was 24 years old and I had no idea what I was going to do next. So a friend of mine suggested, why don't you do a tour around Australia and show all the models and the modeling agencies what happens in Europe, like what's the flying Dior or the latest techniques. I thought that was a great idea. And so I travelled and I went to Canberra, and I was only supposed to be there for 3 weeks. And 6 months later, I'm still in the hotel and still coaching. And my very, very first client was the Ugandan ambassador's wife, the most beautiful, vivacious, magnificent woman. And she took me to a few embassy parties, and I'd also gone to a diplomatic school, which was quite helpful. And with that, I was able to take over one of the embassies in Canberra. So they had discontinued diplomatic immunity, unfortunately, and this place was right opposite Parliament House and next to the lodge. So at 24, I took it over. And I remember sitting at the top of the stairs thinking, what have I done? And I was terrified because it was huge. And there were 4 self-contained servants' quarters out the back. And, you know, the ballroom could sit 250 people. That was me at 25 in this place. But then the finishing school was born. So we taught people like diplomats and politicians how to walk and how to dress and how to speak. We did a lot of etiquette, Eastern and Western etiquette, which was really very popular, and it just grew. And by the time I was 27, I had a internationally reputable finishing school, a modelling and acting agency, and a major event management company. So that was where I became really super creative, and all of that romantic, poetic stuff that people said I was too sensitive for turned out to be great in the show business industry. So we represented performers, actors, singers, jugglers, all sorts of talent, and we put on the most incredible shows. We had such good set design and sound and lighting. Then we worked with a number of record companies, so we did all the styling for their album covers and things like that, promo stuff. But I also got to use all these great performers in our events. So we toured internationally with that, with companies like Westfield and Lend-Lease, and we did Darling Harbour and Queen Victoria Building and a whole range of big Australian venues. And that event management company then grew. So we did outside events for 250,000 people. So, and yeah, I was still under 30. So it was quite, I just guess I was never scared because I had the biggest fear in early on, and nothing really frightened me. I was just extremely, yep, let's go and do it. And I also had an incredible team of people around me who were also very artistic and creative and talented. And so it was probably just in my 30s, I was lucky enough to be finalist in Businesswoman of the Year and also in Lifetime Achievement Award. I remember when I won that thinking, I'm not old enough for that yet. But it was because of our inclusion and diversity and neurodiversity, because we always used multicultural models, models with disabilities, trans models, all sorts of people were in our events and our production company. And it seems to be kind of a big deal now, but we've been doing it since back then. So going back to the moth story, yes, there was a lot of terrible things that happened, A, as a model, and B, as a young businesswoman, where people were super attracted to the light, but then got upset because they got too hot and they got burnt. And it took a long time for me to not take all of that personally, because it really hurt. And I couldn't understand, because I'm a very generous person of nature. I would do anything for anyone to help them and support them. But unfortunately, along with your light, there comes a dark side, and darker entities are attracted to that. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, so I think there are the people who don't want the best for you and try to get your help for nothing. And yeah, people that perhaps even want to, yeah, I don't know, rob you or something. So let's understand, what do you mean by evil people?
Yes. So look, the way that I look at it, when I look at people that do those sorts of things to other businesses or to other people, they're obviously hurting inside themselves. And because they're in so much pain, they need to cause pain to other people, But we're not Florence Nightingale. And in the early days, I used to be able to think that I'd be able to fix things, but obviously you can't always do that. The only thing you can fix...
Especially not if you don't have the allowance. Yeah, if you ask people if they want to get help, yeah, but you are not the one fixing people without their allowance.
Exactly. And some people really just don't want to be fixed either, So yeah, it's tricky as a coach, as you know, as well, because you want the very best for your people and you want them to shine and, be the very best they can be. And sometimes there's a resistance around that too. So yeah, we should probably talk about that. I think it's really important for everyone to name and reject their fear. Like, what is your greatest fear right now? Is it a fear of failure? What sort of mindfulness skills can we use to look? I am a believer in spirituality, and I believe in the Bible, and I believe in Muhammad, and I believe in Buddha. There's a principle there. So everyone, it could be the higher self. But growing up as a Christian, I don't remember in the Bible anywhere it's saying, thou shalt be a doormat, right? So I think it's our duty to be the very best we can be and to live our life to the fullest. But a lot of times people feel like, oh, I shouldn't, I don't deserve it, I'm not worthy, I can't expect this much. And so they block themselves. So there's also that intergenerational trauma. So, particularly for us, with my parents being a part of the war and, reestablishing in Australia, there's also the intergenerational aspects of that with my grandparents and the grandparents before that. So a lot of times people don't realise that they're wearing the grief and the pain from the generation before or the generation before that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I can only see this also from my father's side. Like, my grandmother has been in 2 world wars, my father has been in 1 world war.
Yeah, yeah.
I absolutely can see that this kind of trauma, like losing everything they had and just packing little things, and then they had to flee because of the war, or they couldn't take like their wealth with them. So for me, it was like I could see a pattern that was creating wealth, and then everything is destroyed again, or they had to leave everything behind, and then they have recreated their wealth. And this was a pattern in my life as well. Like, I was going up and down until I could understand, oh, It is coming from an ancestral line that this is still active, and I have this pattern inside of my own history as well. So yeah, be aware what is showing up as a pattern in your own life and see how this can be related to your ancestral line.
Yeah. There are some parts of my ancestral line I think I drive people crazy. It's like I'm typical German, like if you are 5 minutes late, you know, or if you're 5 minutes early, I'm a stickler for time, and punctuality is such a German characteristic, right? And it's never changed. So if people came late to my event, you know, I'd have them replace quick smart. There's certain things, you know, like, but also in our culture, it's like, you know, you must be good and you must be perfect and you must do everything, tuck, tuck, tuck. Well, you know, that's pretty hard to live up to. And those things that we put on ourselves to live up to our own expectations, it's crazy. So I think, you know, we must lay down the law to live up to others' expectations, but in particular, our own expectations, because that's how we burn out. Yeah. So, you know, if we look at what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, and, you know, don't focus on the weaker things. In fact, I have a funny story. I had someone working with me once, and she just didn't like to do events at all. But I used to say, listen to the music. It's so empowering and it's creative. And then the next day I'd see her talking to the crew going, listen to the music. It's powerful. It's creative. But she really did not like events. And we laugh about it today because she ended up being the events manager at the Guardian newspaper in London. And to this day, I laugh about it because it was her weakest point. So often our weakest points are actually our strengths. And I think that that's just so extraordinary. One day somebody told me something, and it was a very interesting thing I'd like to share, and it's called the circle of life. When we're in our 20s, we think we know everything. We kind of do because our moral compass is set, but we really don't because, you know, we've got life experience in front of us. Then in our 30s, we're like, oh, I've got to get a fancy car, I've got to have a really good job, probably have to think about getting married, you know. In our 40s, it's like, are they really my kids? And what happens when I take my suit off at night? You know, I only identify with that character that I'm at work. Like, who am I at home? I don't even know. And you go through the imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I shouldn't be earning this kind of money. And we start sabotaging. In our 50s, we finally get it together. And then our body starts falling apart. And then in the 60s, woohoo, it's the new 40s. You've got it all happening. And then in the 70s and 80s, we wear purple and we go all zen. And that's the circle of life, right? But if I could just assist people in that phase of self-sabotage, because it's just such a waste of time. And yes, you are worthy. And yes, you are deserving. And sometimes that phase goes well into the 50s and 60s, and sometimes it starts much earlier. So we need to watch for that trigger. I mentioned earlier that I had the great privilege for many, many years of working with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And that came about because I had taught in many high schools and universities, and one of my students was actually working in the Northern Territory of Australia with Indigenous empowerment and said, I don't think would you consider coming up here and working in the communities? And I said, of course, I'd love to. So there's a great foundation here in Australia called Fred Hollows, and it's all about eyesight, and they heal eyesight. But of course, you know, obesity and blindness, it all goes hand in hand. And in a lot of communities, they haven't got the access to really healthy foods and things like that. So along with Fred Hollows, For the first few years, I sat in the grass with the elders and then was able to actually travel. So from all of the regional areas around south, which is Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and then, of course, the Northern Territory. So I'd start in Darwin, and then I'd go to Arnhem Land, do some dreamings while I was there, go across to Tiwi Islands, fantastic, go to Catherine, go all the way in a four-wheel drive, all the way down to Uluru. People used to say, aren't you scared? If you crash the car, you know, you won't be found for days. I had no fear. All my fear had been done through the Iron Curtain process, not through driving around the desert or the outback. And then I actually also ended up working with the saltwater people in Broome. Well, there's a big thing now about our Indigenous people with the intergenerational trauma also. And I'm so proud that throughout COVID, I was unable to go and do my normal trips. And I was worried that they think I have left them after 27 years. So for the last 3 years, I've been able to judge the Australian Best of Business Awards for the Indigenous business category. And I'm so proud to see the things that have been achieved and the leaps and bounds that have been made in setting up businesses and getting things moving so their communities are in a better position moving forward. See, a lot of people think, oh, well, you know, they can travel to work. Well, they're very family orientated, and traveling to work in the Northern Territory, that could be days and days. After all those years in the desert, in the outback and in rural Australia, I ended up in Broome, and I went to a particular hotel, and I just couldn't wait to have a hot shower and have a cup of coffee. Being a German, I like my coffee, and it was 3 weeks without coffee. And my room wasn't ready. So they asked me if I'd like to go down by the pool and wait for my room. Well, there were the most magnificent dragonflies, huge, flying around the pool. It was really hot, and I was sweltering. And the gentleman came and said, oh, Miss Deadly, that was my nickname. In Indigenous, that means very cool. Would you like a cocktail? I said, no, I just want coffee. Anyway, it got really hot, and I needed to collapse my deck chair, which, because it's a tropical area, they get blown away. So these were really heavy 200 plus kilo teak chairs that wouldn't get swept away. And I tried to recline it and it wouldn't happen. And then the next minute, snap, and it snapped onto my finger. And I just remember saying, oh, this is not going to be good. And this gentleman next to me saw the blood, and then he just passed out. And a lady from the distance started running towards me. And I just remember I got my hand out and I wrapped it in a towel. And I went to the barman and I said, I think you need to call an ambulance. And he said, oh, no, we need to ascertain the injury. I'll have a look. And then he said, yep, we'll call an ambulance. And the next minute, the chef came running out of the kitchen. He said, Miss Deadly, I'm the chef from the Hyatt Hotel in Canberra. Remember me? And I'm thinking, I've got blood all over me. It's really hot. I've got my fingers hanging off. And anyway, he kept me conscious. That was the point. And I got to this hospital, which had about 3 or 4 rooms. And, yep, it was pretty severe. So they contacted all the hospitals in Perth and Adelaide. And as it turned out, the best hand surgeon available was in Canberra. So I spent a week with my hand up in the air like this, and smoke signals went out, and some of the Indigenous came from Fitzroy's Crossing and had this genius idea of wrapping my fingers in seaweed and tying them up with bark, which the hand surgeon said was the best thing, because if they'd tried to stitch, I would have lost my fingers. So there you go. There's a bit of Bushmeds. The story with the Bushmeds is that I had a paraben-free, sulfate-free, supernatural skincare line. And one of my communities, the ladies put their Bushmeds into that. And today they're sold as an Indigenous product and make money for the communities. And all that happened because of what happened to my finger. So when I got back, people said, oh, did you crash the car? Did you get bitten by a crocodile? No, I got bitten by a snapping deck chair. That's what happened to my hand.
But thanks God that all fingers are still healthy and working,
Yeah.
and, that people did the right thing at the right time. And yeah, it could have happened that, as you said, no, this would be the end of a finger.
Yeah, and also it could have happened, I guess, anywhere out back where it was going to take days to get to the next community or whatever it might be. But what a beautiful culture. It's all family orientated, and, you know, nature is the gods and their dreamings are so special. So if you ever get a chance to look at some Aboriginal dreamings or even their extraordinary artwork, this is the oldest culture on the planet. And to think how they have survived all this time, it's amazing. And it's using all natural things, you know, natural medicines and natural cures, and it's just so phenomenally incredible. And I thank my dad every day for coming to Australia to have that amazing opportunity, and to be proud to say, you know, call them sister. I remember once some young girls came from way out in a community and they hardly spoke English, and they said, Miss Deadly, are you Indigenous? Because I'm quite dark, you know, not the typical Australian. And I say, no, I'm from Germany. And they say, oh, is there Aboriginals in Germany too, miss? You know, it was just so adorable and gorgeous. And, you know, I'm just forever grateful for my wonderful communities. So after having the modelling agencies and the acting agencies and the finishing school, my mother used to say, I don't know how you can do these things, you know, educating presidents and prime ministers, and, you know, I don't know either, but it happened and I was very, very, very good at it. So then I became global. And that was actually just somebody contacted me and said, I don't suppose you'd come to Singapore to do a presentation. And I'd been doing keynote, you know, a lot in Australia and some in Europe. And that was the catalyst then to do Beijing and Shanghai and New Zealand and Hong Kong. And yeah, it was just an incredible life, traveling, going to these exotic countries and staying in beautiful hotels and, you know, feasting on all the beautiful foods and meeting extraordinary people, absolutely extraordinary. So then I wrote the book, Business and Social Etiquette. And of course, I advise, you know, protocol divisions on Eastern and Western business etiquette, and what that all means. And it's all about consideration of others and, you know, in the way we dress and the way we present, whether to handshake, whether not to handshake. I remember once I had a ambassador's wife who was mortified because she had an event new to Australia in her residency, not in the offices. And all these people come to the door and they meet the ambassador and his wife, they meet and greet, and then they go on to enter the room. And so they stood at the door and she extended her hand to a Muslim man. So it was all over the news. And the question is, well, who's right and who's wrong? He was visiting her in her home, or is she responsible? So this little scenario is always good when you want to remember how etiquette works. Etiquette is always consideration of others. So, of course, the guest would always come first. And the protocol advisor should have probably told her that we don't extend our hand to a Muslim man. But in fairness, to a Muslim man, shaking skin-to-skin contact is sexually offensive, and they don't want to do that to offend you. So whichever way you look at it, it's about being considerate of the other. Yeah. So whether it is the way that we dress, so it's white tie, it's black tie, it's cocktail. I recently went to a black tie event and I thought, oh, am I wearing the wrong thing? Am I the wrong event? And they said, no, this is it. But they had short skirts on. Well, that's not black tie. And the reason we have a code, even with the races, for example, is because there's a certain expected standard of dress to go with each event. If you look back in history, you know, why do we not cut our bread? Well, because back when Jesus broke the bread, he broke it, he didn't cut it. Why is the blade of the knife facing inwards? Because in the 12th century, if it faced outwards, it was very easy to pick it up and stab the person next to you. So it was put inward to say, I'm not going to stab you today. Or the sword was always on the right. So if you shook hands, it showed that you didn't have your sword. So all these cultures started from somewhere and sort of a lot of them stuck. COVID has changed a few things because, you know, now there's not the handshaking there used to be, or the social distancing meant that the positioning of a press conference or a gala or a banquet all changed, you know. So, yeah, look, another big part of etiquette is to love and respect yourself, honour yourself, so it's comfortable for other people to be in your majestic presence. But often when we're really awkward and really shy and uncomfortable, we make our guests and people around us awkward and shy and uncomfortable.
Yeah, people can't shine beside us if we don't shine. So it's like we are uplifting them with our own energy and how we appear in certain kind of events and if we are in contact with other people, of course.
Exactly. So as part of the evolution of this story, I came from extreme fear-based background. We grew up with that because we were in a strange country. They didn't speak the language that when they arrived. The food was different. Everything was different. They were so far, far away from anything they were familiar with. And we were raised, just fit in. Don't stand out too much. Don't shine too bright. Just fit in. So that was really hard for each of us individually to find our place and to shine our light. And so as awful and scary and fearful as it was going behind the Iron Curtain, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have had the guts to do anything after that. And once I did that, you know, modeling in front of thousands of people, being on television, you know, being the face of a product, nothing, all that meant to me was I would be able to get in and go back and forward behind the Iron Curtain. As it turned out, I ended up having a cousin from my mother's side living in Paris, which was really helpful because Paris was one of the areas that all models aspire to be a part of, and I was fortunate to be part of that. And I've got to say too, you know, I was never the model that you would imagine. You know, in those days, we had to strap our breasts in and it was all straight up and down. There was no shape, not like today. And it was really, I was never like that. I was a very shapely person. So the fact that I actually even got work is quite extraordinary, particularly in Australia, because the models were typically blonde and blue-eyed, and I was very dark, so it was a bit crazy. Anyway, it was a great foundation to create the finishing school. And what I love the most about that is that I am able to empower people and to help them to shine. And with all these years and years and years and years and years of experience in business now, I'm able to be a valid corporate and business coach, right down to things like dealing with poor performance, stress and absenteeism. There was a part of my career where I had over 300 staff, 300 group certificates. Can you imagine? I don't even think I was 27. If you'd asked me to do those kind of things today, I'm not sure. Because, when you've got nothing, losing nothing doesn't matter. It's as you start gaining things, then you're afraid to lose them. But if you treat every opportunity as I've got nothing to lose, you actually don't. And you've only got everything to gain.
And you gained a lot. So now looking back in your story, like you had so many different things that you created, and you had your kind of little empire, so to say. And so you gained a lot, and still you have not been in fear to lose this. So what are tips that you could give someone, even though they already created their own business and they have to lose something, not to come into fear, to continue and to step into a little risk and to really, step into their passion as well, what they really want to do?
I think that's a really great question, because for me, it's about recreating yourself over and over and over. You can't be stagnant and stay in one thing. So I started my career as a model from 9 to 24. Then I had a finishing school. Then I had an event management company. I had modeling and acting agencies. I became a keynote speaker. COVID taught us all a lot, because all of a sudden we had to start coaching online. And you'd think that I'd be used to that. It wasn't something that I really wanted to be doing, because I liked to be in person, in front of people, but it taught us all that we have to change it up, And now I coach some of the greatest celebrities, politicians, diplomats, rising stars in the world. It's phenomenal. And like my mum said, I can't believe that you're doing all of these things, and advising government departments. And, I know sometimes I think about it too and think, well, how did that happen? But it's just evolving, like a butterfly. You're in a cocoon, and you eventually become this beautiful butterfly. But the butterfly doesn't stay on one flower. They fly from one flower to the next. And you've just got to keep changing, keep evolving, keep recreating your business. And each time you do, you get one step closer to who you truly, authentically are. And sometimes it takes other people to wake that up in you, So now, as a coach for all of these industries, and global companies, what I get from each of these participants is far greater than what they get from me. So I'm always evolving and learning from these incredible people. Look, it's funny too, because we still style a lot, and we used to do that back with the record companies and back with the models. But what might happen is somebody will send their CEO because they're just not dressing appropriately. for their role because they're tired and exhausted and they haven't got any effort left. So we might start there, sure, but it then progresses into, developing their self-esteem and their confidence, and then developing their public speaking skills, and then developing their understanding different personality types and how to work with them. I remember not so long ago, I had a global group, and one of them was from India, and he was extraordinarily clever with IT. And like so many people do, they gave him a promotion to manage 4,000 staff. He said to me, Miss Wagner, I don't know how to do that. I know how to do what I do, and I'm really good, but how do I manage 4,000 people? So then the next level was, okay, well, now we don't do that function anymore. Now we actually have to operate as a manager and work out everybody's skill set and let them shine. And that's a scary part about management and promotion and the C-suite, actually delegating and allowing others to shine. And you're not the one responsible to do all that work anymore. You're responsible to make them shine.
We heard a lot about what you have done and that you are, in creating your dream life over and over again. Is there anything that is coming up now that that you're really passionate about?
Oh, yeah, I have so many things that I'm passionate about. At the moment, I've been working within the disability sector, but particularly with autism and Asperger's, because there's so many people that are like sheer geniuses. They just don't have the social skills. So we've always made films and movies about the disability sector, but now to be able to empower more people and to, help them gain meaningful employment or create a meaningful life, this is really, really important to me. Look, I'm not going to say this all came easy either. Starting a business when I did, women didn't really have families and a business. So I guess I sacrificed that because it just wasn't done. My colleague, she did do that, and she was actually brutally victimized for not being a good mother and not doing this and not doing that. So there are, sacrifices that you have to make. It doesn't all just come freely, but then, there's got to be a gratitude around that as well. Some of the things that have happened as a businesswoman that have been very traumatic, especially in the modelling industry and a female in business, around sexual harassment and misconduct. I'm very passionate now about supporting anyone who feels victimized or bullied in any way, shape or form, because I don't think the bully knows exactly how crushing that is. So I'm a bit of an advocate for that. Just another quick story. I won a huge contract. It was the biggest contract I'd ever had. And the person who was in charge was a male who found it suitable to call me in for a meeting, shut the blinds and lock the door. Need I say any more? And I wasn't going to lose that contract because I loved it. It was something really important and special to me. And I eventually had to report him, and they were so grateful because he'd done it many times before, and they needed like a third warning or a situation in order to be able to remove him. When they actually did Swanette, 50 or more women came forward and men that he had physically abused and sexually harassed and threatened that people would lose their job, etc. It was a really scary thing to do also. But in the end, this person was removed and people were able to go on with their beautiful creative life and job without being harassed. So I'm a bit of an advocate for that as well, to make sure that, you know, we stand our ground and that we know what is acceptable and not acceptable behaviour and not be afraid to speak out.
Yeah, it shows up that you are brave over and over again, and especially in situations where people don't have their own voice, being there and speaking out and changing situation.
And I'm in a position that I can do that. So why wouldn't I? You know?
Most people wouldn't. So why would you?
Yeah. It's just that we've all been given a gift. Some people take much, much longer to recognize or realize what their gift is and what their light is. So I'm making the most of mine and I'm sharing it with as many people as I can. And if I can be a voice for someone, or if I can make somebody feel really good or reconnect someone to their sense of belonging, then I'm very happy. And I know I've done my job and I sleep well at night.
Wow. Yeah. So if people now are interested to contact you, where can they find you? So of course, in person in Australia, but online, where are you? So are you on social media, your website? Please share that.
Yes, it's www.lizzieWagner.com.au. That's Lizzie. And look, I'm still looking at going back to Europe on the speaking circuit and to Asia. But at the moment, I'm coaching online because I have achieved my ultimate dream. Can I share that with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, with my father being a sailor, when we were young, we used to have a house at the coast, and I was a great fan of the beach and dolphins. And my best friend, she was Italian, and she's actually now gone back and living in Italy. We used to play with the dolphins. So I aspired to live on the beach. And I did for a short period of time in my early 20s. And my family all loved it so much they moved to the beach. And then I moved around the world doing my thing. But I've actually moved back to the beach. And every single day I go to the beach, if it's raining or sunny or windy or hot, and I just marvel in the magnificent beauty of this beautiful ocean and its meditative processes. So it was from that I started the mindfulness and meditation music, which is online. And I could not tell you how happy I am because I did it for myself.
Where do people find this music? Is it on your website as well?
Yes, it's on our shop and it's just called Mindfulness, a Guided Meditation. And one of the great performers of world ambient music I met via a record company that I worked for years ago, and he's done all the beautiful backing music. So yeah, that's the other thing. You know, remember, on the way up, you've got to come back down again. And all the people I've met on the way up are still somehow in my life today, you know, and that is what's so extraordinary. It's about contacts and connections and the bonds you make with people, you know, and I'm so proud. Many of my executive assistants, well, all of them are still in touch. Or, you know, my models are still in touch and ring and go, what was that recipe? I've got some famous celebrity coming over for dinner, you know, so I'd give them some cooking recipe or whatever. Or, you know, CEOs that are running cocktail parties and ask me finger food ideas. You know, it's just an amazing, incredible journey. And then, of course, there's people like you that I absolutely admire and adore and am able to speak with. So, and you're all the way in Madeira. And
yeah,
got...
and you can imagine Madeira Island, and we have a lot of dolphins and whales around. So we can be at the beach or like being on a boat and go out and swim with dolphins. So I would like to see you here in person because we know each other only digitally, and it would be so amazing, yeah,
That would be
to hug
absolutely
you.
magic. And you know, I have a lot of family still in Europe. So you're just a hop, skip, and a jump. So you never know, you might be seeing me very soon.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being my guest, and hope to see you soon here in Madeira Island. And
I can't wait. And I just don't think people realize how lucky they are to have you, and they could probably go too. Wouldn't that be great?
Absolutely. So everybody who wants to come to Madeira Island, I'm happy to meet you here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening or watching my podcast, Holistic Creators. If you want to know more about how I can help and support you, have a look at my website, spiritualchangemaker.com. You can also join my Facebook group, Spiritual Changemakers Community. Stay tuned for the next episode by subscribing to this channel. And you also can check the previous episodes.